Welcome, sharps, squares, and newbies. I'm actually going to explain what all those mean. I think you can understand newbies at some point in the very near future. But welcome to the Parleh Sports Betting Show. I'm Jorey Middlestadt, alongside my co-host, the professional Harley Redlick. We come to you each and every week on Canada's sports betting network, otherwise known as the Parleh. We always want to hear from you, folks. Questions at theparleh.com is how you email us. You can also reach us both on Twitter. I'm at Jorey Middle. I'll keep saying it. Jorey is Jorey. Harley is at Sharp Edge Picks. Hopefully you can spell that one out. This is show number 5. And as you might expect, we will be dominated by talk about Super Bowl 56 this upcoming Sunday. It is the biggest betting day of the year. And I think that is without dispute. Would that be correct, Harley?
Oh, well, in North America, no doubt it's without dispute, probably even internationally because things are more staggered across the globe.
So what's on this week's show? We're going to break down the Super Bowl every which way. We're going to handicap the actual game itself. And then what's by far the most fun part about the Super Bowl are the props. Now, going back many years, the Super Bowl was almost the only game where proposition bets were even offered. Now, that's not exactly true, but I think it is safe to say that the Super Bowl offers more prop betting opportunities than just about any other betting event, right, Harley?
100%. We were talking to the head of sportsbook. The parlay was yesterday. I was talking to Johnny Avello, and he described it as they have a magazine now of prop bets. So we talked a little bit about this starting in the 80s and getting popular with William the Refrigerator Perry's touchdown. But since then, it's morphed. And with the advent of online and the ability they have to get derivative lines or games and props, staggering how many props there are to choose from.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of wild ones that actually have nothing to do with the football game. I tend to avoid those. We may or may not mention those as we go through, but those are not where my focus is. My focus is, and I'm sure yours is actually on what's going to happen in the game itself. We will also touch upon the Olympics as we're almost at the midway point. We're at the mid-weekend of the Olympics. We'll tell you about a couple awesome winners that Harley gave you last week, in just a moment. We will have our gambling story of the week. And after yesterday's crazy NBA trade deadline, in particular, the one blockbuster trade between the Sixers and the Nets, we are going to take a look at updated NBA futures. We were going to wait until the All-Star break, and we still might revisit them then. But given what happened yesterday, we thought it was appropriate to take a look at the updated odds and where you might find some value at this very moment. So just quickly, we always like to recap what happened the week before. I mean, Harley's been on fire in the 5 weeks, in the previous 4 weeks, I should say, since we started doing this podcast. 5-2 on the NFL playoffs. And one of those wins was a 2-game parlay that paid almost 3-1. So if you've been following Harley's picks on the NFL, you've been cashing tickets. And last week, when we talked about how to bet the Olympics and look for value, Harley gave you 2 picks in women's alpine skiing. The actual events were the slalom and the giant slalom. And Harley's advice was, in most of the Olympic events, is fade the favorites. In other words, avoid the favorites. There's no value. Try and find an underdog that has a chance of winning and look there. And what did Harley do last week? He gave you 2 winners in those 2 women's races by fading American Michaela Schifrin, who didn't even complete a run in the slalom and crashed out. Well, she didn't crash, but bombed out early as well in the giant slalom. So give us the lowdown on those payoffs, Harley.
Exactly what you said. Michaela Schifrin is amazing, but she was overhyped or overbet because she was the big American star, one of the only known skiers to most bettors. And instead, it was the co-favorite in the Olympic slalom, Petra Vlhova. And she was actually the minus 115 favorite along with Michaela. and she won. She was a technical expert. And then Sarah Hector at plus 292 was the second favorite to Michaela, the Swedish alpine racer in the Olympic giant slalom. She went on to win. So basically, the situation was remarkably similar to the way it is with women's Olympic hockey, where there's two main favorites, and one of them's Michaela. One of them was a specialist from a small European country. The value was with the small European country, came in both times. Had you invested the way I said and split your bets, you would have taken home almost 3 times your money.
Fantastic. That's the goal here, folks. Give you winners, but educate you as well. And along those lines, we're not going to do a specific betting concept today. We'll reintroduce another one next week, but we may refer to them as we go through our Super Bowl analysis and the Super Bowl proposition bets. And we did talk about proposition bets on a previous show. So go back and listen if you're not entirely clear as to what a proposition bet is. We should also mention, because we have to talk winners and losers, you did throw out, even though the lines weren't out yet, to take a look at Fred VanVleet of the Toronto Raptors last Friday night when they were on a back-to-back, and look at playing under his point total. That one actually didn't cash, as the Raptors are on a crazy win streak right now. And Freddie's on fire, although he didn't actually play last night. But we do want to point out that one was not a winner, right? We got to point out the winners and the losers.
The Raptors have now won 8 in a row.
8 in a row, yeah.
Their starters, we'll get into it more when we talk about the futures, have logged insane minutes. Great additions for them at the trade deadline just because they need to rest their starters. But what an unbelievable run by that team.
Yeah, and it's not over yet. As you said, 8 in a row, including winning the last 2 nights again on back-to-backs. They've had a bunch of them lately. All right, it's that time, Harley. The biggest betting day of the year. Not my favorite Sunday. I like Championship Sunday a little better because you get 2 great games, and sometimes they're better than the Super Bowl itself. Although after a long run of just awful Super Bowls, the last 10, 15 years, we haven't had too many stinkers. And I don't think anybody is expecting Super Bowl 56 to be a stinker, especially the way the divisional round and Championship Sunday have played out. So let's talk Super Bowl 56. It's the number 4 seeds. Both are number 4 seeds, the 15-5 Los Angeles Rams and the 13-7 Cincinnati Bengals. Playoff wins are included in those records. And it's interesting because the line opened the Rams as the favorite, mostly -3.5. There were 4s as well. It was a mix. And the total opened up at 50. So the total points over under for the game, 50. The spread ended up being bet up to 4.5, the Rams -4.5 fairly quickly. And the total was bet down to 48.5 relatively quickly. Well, as of last night, most of the point spreads were Rams -4.5, and the total has been staying steady at around 48.5. I looked this morning, and now most of the books, with the odd exception, have the Rams favored by 4, meaning Bengal money has been coming in. The total's either around, most still 48.5s. There still are some 49.5s. So your thoughts on the initial line and where we're at right now, and if you think it's an accurate one?
I think all the lines are accurate for this Super Bowl, and I'm actually going to take a pass when it comes to betting both this game and the over-under and capitalize on some of the prop bets. Usually I like to bet unders, especially in the Super Bowl with the hype. I always start by looking at the look-ahead line. For those of you that don't know, they come out with a line before the championship games get played. And then you like to see kind of how that jives with the reality afterwards, because often there's value because people get overexcited about one result. And the over-under in this game was supposed to be 51.5. And it came in, like you said, it's pretty much 48.5 across the board.
It opened 50, though.
Right. And they bet it down. The reality is that these teams aren't gunslinging teams compared to the Chiefs and the Bills or even the Packers and the Bucks. So this will be a kind of a tighter game, 24-20 type of game. I don't bet overs, and I'm not betting an under that's at 48.5 when it was supposed to be at 51.5. So there's no value there. So that's a pass. For the point spread, the Rams are clearly the better team, and they're at home, but they're not way better than the Bengals. And I think the pricing is about right in this range. Again, 4.5. It lands on the number 4 about 2-3% of the time. So that number is material, but not super material. And it'll probably, I think I said even last week, waver around that point in time. Johnny Avello, again, when he was on with the parlay guys yesterday, said that there's more Bengals money than Rams money. It's rare to see money going on the dog in the Super Bowl. But the mentality, I'm assuming, amongst most bettors is the Rams are not a super team. They don't have a super sexy quarterback. There's no Brady. There's not even a Rodgers or an Allen. So at the end of the day, getting points, especially bettors just pay attention to what they just saw. And all we've seen for the last 2 rounds are super close games. So the value of getting 4.5 points to a lot of bettors seems pretty appealing. The casual bettors just watch these games and thinks every NFL game is decided by a field goal at the buzzer.
And that's the way the last 2 rounds of the playoffs have gone. And the Bengals have been in all 3 of their wins, have been super close and have come right down to the wire. A couple interesting tidbits. These 2 teams, and I'll clarify, have never won the Super Bowl. Bengals have been to a couple. Rams franchise has a Super Bowl win, but that was when they were in St. Louis. But the LA Rams, right? I'm getting a little technical here.
That's pretty technical. The greatest,
but it's true. Have never won a Super Bowl.
Won a Super Bowl. They were wearing the same colors they'll be wearing. In fact, they're the only Super Bowl champion that had a movie then made about them. I didn't see it. Did you see it? They just came out with the movie with the Kurt Warner story.
Yeah, it's called Underdog. I have not seen it. I've heard it's pretty decent, but something to check out. Movie reviews way down the line on this show. All right, quick breakdown of the game, and I'll let you react to. And I'm going to look at my notes because I actually made notes here, Harley. So keys to a Bengals win. Mm-hmm. The first thing I will say is statistically, this is the best defense that the Bengals will have faced all year. And I think that's important because key number 1 is protect Joe Burrow. He was the most sacked quarterback during the regular season this year, 51 times. And so if I was game planning the Bengals, and not that I'm the be all and end all of game planning, but at least in terms of what to look for, I would expect them to try a lot of quick passes, right? 2-3 step drops or out of the shotgun where he's getting the ball out of his hands quickly. And obviously they'd love to run the ball and run the ball effectively, mainly with Joe Mixon on early downs, and also work in some screen passes because their offensive line is not very good in pass protection. So it would make sense, you would think, to approach the game plan that way. On the flip side of the ball on defense, they need to stop the run. The Rams want to run the ball. Their offense is predicated on doing it and doing it effectively because that sets up their play action pass game. That's where Stafford is most effective. That's where their receivers tend to find holes in the opposing defense. And I think that is super, super important. I'm going to say this for both teams. It's always important. Don't turn the ball over, as that is always a huge factor in any football game, especially in a one and done scenario, which is how the football playoffs work. There's no series here. In terms of the intangibles, I don't know if you've noticed this, but, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, but the defense for the Bengals and their defensive coordinators seem to make good adjustments as the game goes on. Just go back and look at their 3 playoff games where they've been so much better in the second half. The other thing that I want to point out, and this could really become a factor as you described in talking about close games, they have a really good kicker. This rookie, Evan McPherson's been perfect in the playoffs. The nerves don't seem to bother him. That may change in the Super Bowl, hard to say. And the other sort of intangible thing I would say about the Bengals is they appear to have this sort of team of destiny feel going right now, given that they've never won a Super Bowl. They hadn't won a playoff game in 34 years or something like that. So how do you see the keys to victory for the Bengals in terms of what I just said and your own thoughts?
So we're going to use some old school movie theme lines to tie in as a theme for this show. And Jorey, you had me at hello, the famous line from McGuire. This entire game is predicated on the Rams pass rush versus the woeful Bengals offensive line. When the Rams have the ball, the Rams can kind of run and kind of pass, and the Bengals can kind of stop the run and kind of stop the pass. And maybe on a good day, the Bengals D steps up more, and maybe on a good day, Stafford stands up more. The real test and the real disaster and problem for the Bengals is the fact that they've been sacked the third most times in the NFL this year, and the Rams have the third most sacks. Aaron Donald and company are absolute machines, and the Bengals offensive line stinks. The Titans sacked Burrow nine times.
I know. Playoff record. A playoff record. And
NFL
didn't win
record,
the game.
Again, the 9 times, an obscure reference to a classic 80s movie. That's how many times Ferris Bueller was absent from school. 9 times. If you remember, Brady's lost 3 Super Bowls, largely because twice to the Giants and once to the Eagles, the front 4 pressured him. That's the key to the game. Cincinnati knows this. Cincinnati's reaction is going to be exactly what you said. If you can run the ball, amazing. Quick passes, great. Or the third option, only send a couple receivers out and have running backs and tight ends to help out on the blocking and double team the line. Cincinnati's offense is better be creative and figure out some answers, or Burrow's going to be on his ass all game. There's going to be turnovers. And the truth is, then the Rams offense can run a little bit, play a little play action, just not make mistakes. And it won't matter how amazing McPherson is, because if Burrow keeps getting sacked, he's not going to get a chance to do anything either.
All right. Well, don't spoil my fun here, Harley, because I have the keys to a Rams win too. You kind of gave some of them, but I'll review them very quickly. On offense, as I said, the Rams want to run the ball. That is how their offense is built, to set up the play action, and they are deadly. And Stafford thrives on play action as opposed to straight dropbacks. That'll also allow them to slow down the Bengals pass rush, which is decent. It's pretty good. And the Rams offensive line is not the greatest in pass protection either. All the more reason why they want to run the ball. I think it goes without saying, given Matt Stafford tied for the league lead in interceptions this year, even though he had a tremendous count touchdown passes. I think he was second in the league in that regard, but he's got to avoid the big mistake. I mean, again, turning the ball over, it's so obvious, but it needs to be said. And in particular, those deep balls. He's had a few occasions. You'll remember the San Fran game when Truitt dropped that sure pick early in the fourth quarter when the Rams had gotten to within 3 and were on the move again. That was a huge play in the game. He's had trouble kind of throwing up these deep balls into double coverage. He can't do that. He can't turn the ball over. On the defensive side of the ball, I think the key for the Rams is to not allow Jamar Chase, to beat you with big plays. I would expect, and what I'm reading is that he's going to be seeing a lot of Jalen Ramsey, the best corner in the league. And that little thought will factor into some of our prop bets that we'll get to in a minute. So they want to stop the big plays from Chase, and in general, try to get Cincinnati into obvious passing downs so they can let the big boy pass rushers like Donald and Von Miller and Leonard Floyd loose and go crazy on that weak Bengal offensive line. And along with that, stop Joe Mixon in the run on early downs. And then, for the Rams, try to saw off the special teams, because I mentioned McPherson. He's a much better kicker than Matt Gay on the Rams side. And in fact, Gay has struggled a little bit in the playoffs. Any additional thoughts on the Rams' keys to winning the game?
Not really. I mean, again, the Rams offense is pretty good. The Bengals defense is pretty good. The exciting parts of this Super Bowl are going to be when the Bengals have the ball and some of those Rams guys that you mentioned, Miller, Floyd, Donald, look like wild rabid dogs, and they're not going to look up and see Joe Burrow. They're going to see a raw piece of good steak. and
they want to eat.
And if the Bengals can find a way to dunk balls and screen and draw or come up with cute plays, or if their offensive line actually steps it up, I mean, every Super Bowl, there's guys who step it up, who have the games of their lives. And if the left guard and left tackle, or I guess even more importantly, the right guard and right tackle, because Donald usually lines up on the left side, has the game of his life, I mean, the Bengals will win. And I mean, I don't think an offensive lineman has ever won MVP. You could probably get like 5,000 to 1 on that. But like,
I don't even know if they're listed, but yes,
they're part of the field, which is 25-30 to 1. But I mean, that would be hysterical. But I mean, at the end of the day, if the right guard for the Bengals, I don't even know who it is, somehow protected Burrow and Donald never got in his face, I mean, and the Bengals win, that dude is the MVP. I mean, they're the silent heroes, the offensive line. So we'll see.
So you're not making a play on the side or the total on Super Bowl 56. I'll give you a quick thought in just a sec. A couple little tidbits along those lines. The spread has not factored into the last 12 straight Super Bowls, meaning the situation has not come up where the underdog lost the game but covered the spread. So the spread has been right. The spread is not factored into the outcome of the last 12 Super Bowls. And the spread is only factored into one of 12 playoff games this entire postseason. That was the last game we saw, right? The Rams and the Niners. Mm-hmm. Rams win by 3. They don't cover. They were 3.5 or 4-point favorites, depending on the closing line at your book. Did you want to add something to that?
Oh, no, I just had a fond memory of a Super Bowl where the dog covered but did not win. I was in Las Vegas with my little brother. We played an all-nighter, playing cards at the Mirage, protected our seats, got our seats in the sports book, loaded up on the Carolina Panthers. They were a 6-point dog to the Patriots. It was an awesome Super Bowl where there was like no scoring till right before the half, and then like 40 points got scored, and then there was crazy action in the second half.
Jake Delhomme. That was the Jake Delhomme.
Jake Delhomme. The Patriots won it by 3.
Yeah.
Panthers covered +6. If you bet the Panthers with the points mattered. Yeah, great Super Bowl memory.
As far as the totals go, how about this? 55 Super Bowls, Harley, 27, 27, and 1. A dead heat over versus under. The last 3 Super Bowls have gone under the posted point total. My quick thoughts on the game are the Rams are the better team, and I can give you a lot of reasons why. But I am getting a little bit caught up in this Bengals team of destiny thing. Also, the closeness of all the playoff games. And if you've been listening to the podcast, I keep saying over and over, there is so little to choose from the top teams in this league. They're also closely bunched because all have weaknesses given the way rosters are built in the salary cap era. So I would suggest the value is on the Bengals at +4. If you can get 4.5, even better. And maybe even take a look at the money line. I think that's where the value is, even though I think the Rams are the better team and probably win the game. I think you'd be foolish not to take the points. I'll let you react to that, and then we'll get to the props.
Fair enough. It's like I said, I think everything is priced pretty good in this game. There's no bad bets. I have no problem with bettors betting over 48.5. because the look ahead was 51.5. I have no problems with bettors betting under because these teams don't put up points the way KC or Green Bay does. No problem taking the Rams. They're the better team. They could win by a touchdown or more. I have no problem taking the Bengals. I mean, I think the pricing is just right, which is why, even though it's the Super Bowl, if you're a professional, you just pass or you look at the props.
One final note, both teams are pretty healthy. There aren't a ton of injury concerns, but on both sides, the first string tight ends for both teams are listed as questionable. CJ Uzomah, who's had a really good playoff until he got hurt in the AFC Championship game for the Bengals, says he is playing no matter what, but he had a knee injury. He hasn't practiced a lot, so how effective he will be, important, and that will come into our prop bet discussion. And on the flip side, Rams number 1 tight end Tyler Higbee, who's also had a good postseason until he was injured in the NFC Championship game, is listed as questionable. He hasn't practiced that much. The word is he will play, but I would wait right up and as long as you can if you have interest in those guys from a prop bet perspective. And so let's turn our attention to the most fun you can have watching the Super Bowl, at least in my opinion, and that is playing prop bets. And a couple quick rules that I have. I try to avoid, the coin toss and the length of the national anthem and the color of the Gatorade that they throw on the winning coach. Those don't really interest me. I find it's hard to find value. And the other thing, and I'm sure you're going to agree with this, at least to a certain extent, is avoid big juice. I try very hard. Sort of my threshold is minus 120. Unless I absolutely love the prop, I try very hard not to lay more than 20 cents juice on a prop bet. What do you think?
I only have 3 prop bets for this Super Bowl. They're all plus money dogs. And when we get to the bankroll management, I'll explain also how I would bet the 3. If I win any one of the 3, I turn a profit on the Super Bowl. To me, that's a nice place to start. I definitely agree with you. Betting the coin flip is insane. I mean, you're literally just paying juice on a coin flip.
Yeah.
And although, funny story, I was playing around with the OLG app, and because they're live now, and I suspected my account was being limited, and I could not get $250 on the coin flip. So, I mean, not only am I limited on the OLG app, but it's such a poor job by the risk management side that they just limited me across the board. They didn't adjust it. Literally, it's a coin flip that nobody knows how it's going to go, and they're charging good juice, and I still can't bet it for $250. So shame on them and bad risk management. Come April 4th, it'll be nice that we'll have a lot of private operators, and competition's always good for the market. The only bet of those that I can see are either the anthem or the Gatorade color, assuming you have access to some form of inside information.
Yeah.
So if 100%. You know a water boy for the Bengals and you know that he likes orange Gatorade, load up on orange Gatorade and hope the Bengals win, and that's great. You bet Bengals, orange Gatorade, maybe you bet the Rams to win the Super Bowl, and you figure you're going to make money either way. Or they had a story, when was it? Last year, I guess because of COVID, the practices were locked down to the public, but there were a couple of people outside the Super Bowl that heard the national anthem being rehearsed. So they just pressed start on their iPhone, ticked off the timing. I'm going to butcher the numbers, but let's just make it simple. It came in at like 157 when the over-under was like 137, and they had 20 cents, and they hammered the over, and it came in, especially for the early better. So, yeah, I mean, if you know your stuff, you know your stuff, but otherwise, just try to focus on a few fun game props.
Yeah, if you don't have inside info, forget those kinds of props, and make sure you check how inside that info is, because you could easily be fooled. All right. The way I like to look at props is the first thing you have to do is figure out how you think the game's going to play out. In other words, you think the Rams are going to win? You think the Bengals are going to win? You think there's going to be a lot of points? You think there's going to be less points scored, right? And it's going to go under the total. That should have a huge impact on how you make your prop bets. Correct?
I don't disagree. You got to come up with scenarios. And along those lines, my favorite Super Bowl prop bet is Joe Mixon to win MVP at 40-1 for the exact reason you just described. 40-1 is obviously a big price, and I don't think it's necessarily going to happen. But we keep talking about the whole game being predicated on whether or not the Bengals can stop the pass rush of the Rams. And the easiest way to stop the pass rush of the Rams is to either be able to run the ball with Mixon or dump a lot of screen passes. Remember when Brady came back from that 28-3 down and won it? I don't remember who their running back was, but he had like 15 catches for like 250 yards. It was insane. If it was
James White, as I recall.
Right. If it was anybody but Brady as quarterback, I mean, he caught half the balls. He ran the ball well. I mean, he's the MVP. They just give it to Brady because, I mean, it's Brady. And that's a knock when you bet anybody but the quarterbacks. The quarterbacks are the defaults. But I do like that situation. I like Mixon at 40-1 for the exact reason that we just said. If they can't stop the pass rush, which they probably can't, the only way the Bengals win the game is if they can run the ball or do the dunk passes. I actually hammered Mixon at 40-1 on Pinnacle for a max bet, and the odds dropped to 28-1. It's going back to like 32-1 on Pinnacle, and I'm eyeing to possibly bet it again.
So it's funny because Joe Mixon is one of the props I like. So the way I've sort of done my notes and the way I've tried to handicap the prop bets is if you like the Bengals, these are some that I like. And again, I'm not saying I'm betting these per se, but I'm saying if you like the Bengals, here are some things to consider. I like the TD scorer prop. I rarely play the first TD or last TD if I'm betting those props during the season or during the playoffs. But Super Bowl first TD is kind of a tradition for me, and I like it. So I think and I don't bet the favorites in this regard. I like to look a little further down the list, and it works into how I'm assessing the game flow as you just described. So for first TD, I have two things I like. Tyler Boyd, the slot receiver for the Bengals at plus 1,400. And again, check odds. I'm using one particular book, but the book I looked at had him at plus 1,400. Or Joe Burrow at plus 3,300. Now, he doesn't run very often, but sometimes on the one, they'll use him as in the quarterback sneak, or protection breaks down, which we think is going to happen a lot, and he'll scramble one in 33-1. I like that. I like those odds. Those are two value plays for me. On the anytime touchdown side, I have Joe Mixon at plus 105 as one option. And I always for some reason, I always gravitate towards tight ends in the Super Bowl for touchdowns. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I've actually cashed a bunch of those tickets over the years. And so injury status notwithstanding, if CJ Uzomah plays, I don't mind him, and hopefully he's effective. So it's a little risky. I just want to point that out because of his injury status. He's at plus 350 for an anytime touchdown. You have any thoughts on touchdown scores?
Yeah, actually, my second bet is for Rams star wide receiver, the great white hype Cooper Kupp, to not score a touchdown, plus 129. If you look at the props, Matthew Stafford's only expected to throw just over two touchdowns in the Super Bowl. Kupp's an amazing wide receiver. He caught 16 touchdowns in the regular season, but that was on 41 passes by Stafford. So less than half, only 39% of Stafford's touchdown passes go to Kupp. The odds, in my opinion, are about 50-50 of Kupp getting one in the Super Bowl. You're getting good value, plus 129, because everyone is betting on the Phenom. Again, I just fade him for value. I think he's excellent, but the odds are probably closer to 50-50 that he scores a touchdown, and you're getting plus 129. So I bet Kupp doesn't score a touchdown in the Super Bowl.
All right, so let's flip that on the Rams side for touchdown scores. Tight ends. Tyler Higbee is plus 1,200. But if he's, looking a little iffy going into the game, again, follow up, check his status. Then his backup Blanton is a good option at plus 1,400. On the anytime side, Sony Michel at plus 350. Akers is the feature back in the playoffs since he's come back from that injury, but he's had fumbleitis and he had less touches in the championship game because of the turnovers in the Tampa game in the divisional round. And so they've been using Michel as they get closer to the goal line. So at plus 350 for an anytime touchdown, I think there's some value there. And the other one is Odell Beckham Jr. And that plays off exactly what you just said with Kupp. And Odell has been phenomenal in the playoffs.
Yes, he has.
He's been hitting all his props, especially receptions, receiving yards, and actually the numbers reflect that. I'll come back to that in just a minute. Trying to move things along. Here are some other props that I like. First, if you like the Bengals, and that's where you're leaning. As we've just talked about and broken down, so I won't do it again. I like Joe Mixon over 26.5 receiving yards. It's only minus 105, so low juice. And that goes into what we've been talking about, the game plan, slowing down the pass rush. So using him in the passing game, screen passes, or putting him out wide on a linebacker on early downs. I like that one. And what I talked about with Jalen Ramsey, likely taking on Jamar Chase one-on-one for most of the game. I like Tyler Boyd, their slot receiver for the Bengals, over 41.5 receiving yards at minus 110. And I will couple that with Tyler Boyd over 4.5 receptions, which when I was looking last night was plus 130. So always good, right? And this goes to what you're talking about, like with correlated parlays or correlating your bets, right? I like Boyd in the game. I think he's going to have a good game. So I'm looking at him as receptions and yards.
Yeah, I mean, if you bet those as same game parlays on most of the sites, they're going to slash the odds on one or the other because they understand.
I'm just talking straight up. Yeah, I'm
Sure.
just talking straight up. We'll talk about same game parlays as well before we leave the Super Bowl prop chat. On the Rams side, receiving yards, as I mentioned, Odell Beckham over 63.5, minus 110. Because he's just been killing it because teams are trying to take away Cup and they're leaving OBJ one-on-one all playoffs long, and he's been feasting on that. It's funny. The first playoff game, his over receptions was 3. His reception total was 3.5. Then it went up to 4.5. Now it's 5.5. So I'm not going over 5.5, but I do think he can hit the yardage prop. And the other one, actually, I'm going to leave it out because my thoughts have changed. But if you think that the running backs for the Rams are going to be involved in the passing game, you may want to look at Cam Akers over 15.5 receiving yards. That's like one good screen pass, and over 2.5 receptions, which is plus 135. The over 15.5 receiving yards was minus 110. So those were the main ones that I found, again, based on whether you think the Rams win the game or the Bengals win the game. Those were some that I identified. Just quickly, any thoughts on interceptions? If you think there's going to be interceptions in the game, I think Jalen Ramsey over a half, meaning he has to get one, plus 725 isn't bad value. And on the Bengals side, Awuzie over a half at plus 650. Those are little long shot lottery type bets. You have any thoughts?
I mean, they sound pretty good. I mean, you throw a ball up. I mean, I'd have to look at the numbers. I mean, how many how many interceptions does Ramsey get on the year? It sounds like he probably gets more than 3 or 4. So, I mean,
around that,
it sounds like the pricing's not bad unless the strategy on Burrow's behalf is just not throw to that side of the field. I don't think Ramsey's Deion Sanders, so he warrants that.
So, all right. So those were the player props, because there's other props as well that they call main props, which generally have to do with the game flow and the outcome of the game. One of my faves, I play it almost every year, is the winning margin prop. Have you ever played that one?
No, I understand. You could pick, is the team going to win by 1 to 5, 6 to 10, all the way down the line? I mean, I guess it's
generally a
6
point.
If you think it's going to be a close game and you want to bet the team to win close, I guess you can juice up your returns that way.
So very quickly, the ones that I have identified in this regard is the Bengals to win by 1 to 6, because they've won all their playoff games in that range at plus 425. And given that the Rams 4.5 point favorite, currently 4, just to be clear, taking the Rams to win by 7 to 12 at plus 450. I think if it's not necessarily a blowout, but a one score or more game, you would take the Rams in that regard as opposed to the Bengals. You agree?
Yeah, sure. They're the favorite, so I guess that makes sense. It's funny because my third and last prop is also a game prop based on flow, and that's the Bengals plus 126 to win the first quarter. Go back to game flow again. Since he's coached, Zach Taylor's conservative. He rarely goes for it on 4th down. And they have an awesome field goal kicker in Evan McPherson. If you add it all up, they're the team more likely to kick the 45, 50-yard field goal, get some points on the board, and they're up 3-0, and then the Rams are driving, and you think they're going to score, and then the next thing you know, it goes to commercial. That's the end of the first quarter. The Bengals are up 3-0, and you get that win. Plus 126 to me sounds like a big price for a pretty close game to win a quarter when it's often decided on one play.
One other thing I uncovered in looking at some numbers for this game, and it's something that I've played before, depending on the teams and the matchup, and that is the highest scoring quarter, right?
Mm-hmm.
The worst odds or the highest payoff is always the first quarter. The
Mm-hmm.
lowest odds are always the second and the fourth.
Mm-hmm.
The obvious reason being, a team could be, deep in the other team's territory at the end of a quarter. So you get a quick score with very little time going off the
Mm-hmm.
clock. So I always look at the third quarter. It's the second best payoff. I tend to actually look at the first quarter, like no score in the first 5.5 minutes of the game. I've played that a lot, and it's actually, there's some value there on that one in this game, although the juice I don't love. But getting back to the highest scoring quarter being the third, it's plus 500. And the numbers to back that up are as follows. The Bengals were, if not the best, they were right near the top in the third quarter scoring all season long and had the best point differential in the third quarter in the entire league. And the Rams, on the flip side, are near the bottom in that statistical category. So for me, based on the numbers and how these teams tend to play throughout the season and the postseason, highest scoring quarter in the third at plus 500 sounds like a decent, again, kind of lottery fun play where you're getting a big payoff because you're getting a lot of big plus odds.
Yeah, I mean, if the Bengals
it doesn't look like you're impressed.
No, I'm not impressed at all. You just told us earlier in the show that the Bengals defense does a great job adjusting at halftime.
Yes,
and
they
then
do.
You're going over the third quarter. So, I mean, unless you can parlay, you might be able to parlay highest scoring quarter with team to win the game, in which case, maybe if your theory is right, you can combine that with the Bengals and maybe there's some value to the parlay.
The last one I have on a main prop is it's a high number, is total sacks. It's over 5.5. Mm-hmm. It's actually plus juice right now at plus 105. So it fits that criteria for me. And as we've talked about, both offensive lines struggle in pass protection. And I think we could and should see a lot of sacks on both sides.
Again, I don't know if you can parlay some of those props with game results. You might be able to. If you can parlay over 5.5 sacks with the Rams, or even though ideally the Rams alt by 7, by 10, I mean, that's great. It obviously goes together. If there's 8 or 9 sacks in this game, Burrow's on his ass for most of those sacks. I mean, and that's kind of how it works.
Stafford's been sacked 5 times in the last 2 postseason games as well. So that really caught my attention, given the struggles of both offensive lines. Quick thought on same game parlays for this one. For me, I like to take a side, whether it be money line or spread or an alternative spread, pair it with the total, right? And they should be correlated, right? And sometimes an alternative total, and then put those together with player props, again, that are correlated. So the side and the total, like if you're going to do, you think the Rams are going to win, so you take the Rams on the money line, on an alternative spread. You probably would then go over the total or an alternative total and pair it with, a TD player prop or receptions or rushing yards. Do you agree that that's the way to build the same game parlay if you're going to do it? I like four legs in a game like this for the big payoff. Again, I'll keep saying it. It's more like a lottery ticket, but the Super Bowl is about fun. You want to have action on the game, taking note of what's happening on each play, right? If it's affecting your prop bets. So that's the way I would do it. How about you?
100% if you want to do it. That's kind of the fun way to do it. You play out the scenario. So again, if you think the Bengals are going to win, you bet the under, you bet Mixon over rushing yards, and you bank on a small ball control game. with the same game parlays, you got to be careful because they start charging more and more juice depending on the correlation. So you got to make sure you're super correlated even more than they think, or you end up getting juiced to death. If you like the long shot lotteries, again, I prefer just taking long shot MVPs like Mixon at 30 or 40 to 1. I'm so glad the show is today. Today is the 32nd anniversary of the night Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson at, again, about 40 to 1 in Tokyo to become the champ, the most famous upset in boxing history. So at around 40 to 1, we're going to put in another movie reference. So you're saying there's a chance. And again, my favorite bet is Mixon. The two other props I had were Cup no touchdown plus 129 and Cincy winning the first quarter plus 126. If you bet about $45 on each of the two small plus money ones, $10 on Mixon, you turn a profit if any one of the three come in. And if Mixon's the MVP, you win 3 times your money. Those are my props for the Super Bowl.
Very selective, Harley. No thoughts on the side or total, but that's why you're a pro, right? If you don't love it, you don't play it. And 3 value props. Hopefully the guys in the back room will cut those, right? And that last little segment and put it out as a short clip so everybody knows what Harley has taken on the Super Bowl. So that'll wrap up our lengthy Super Bowl analysis, if you will. Yesterday was a nutty day in the NBA with the trade deadline, a lot of action. The focus, of course, if you're not a Toronto Raptors fan, and they did get rid of the Goran Dragic contract and bring in a warm body in Thaddeus Young. But the big one was between the Sixers and the Nets. The key guys there being obviously James Harden going to Philly, Ben Simmons, who hasn't even seen the court this year, going back to Brooklyn. And that immediately impacted the odds to win the NBA championship. So explain.
Obviously, the Sixers are boosted this year with Harden and Embiid as a superpower dynamic duo who complement each other. The Nets dropped odds-wise a little bit this year because while Simmons is good, he's not Harden, but he's around for longer on contract. So the Nets made, I think, a good trade overall. If you look at the odds, I think the Nets were, I'm pulling them up right now. The Nets were, I believe, 3
They were about
to
3
1.
plus 3. Yeah, about plus 3 to plus 350 most of places prior to the trade.
Yeah, so the Nets went from 3 to 1 to higher, maybe 4 to 1, up to maybe even 7 to 1. You can get them at the right book. And Philly, on the other hand, went from the 12, 15 to 1 range to about 4 to 5 to 1. And they're in the main conversation. Right now, we got Golden State and Phoenix in the West. It's funny. Remember those LA teams, Kawhi, the Lakers, LeBron, Clippers. Those guys are like 50 to 1 long shots. They're not even in the discussion. Basically, there's Golden State and Phoenix and Utah, and then a bunch of power teams in the East. The Raptors really, unfortunately, have their work cut out for them because while the Raptors are a good team, the East is all of a sudden top heavy, and maybe 5 of the top 7 teams in the league come from the East.
So given the change, obviously, though, the Nets and the Sixers were most affected. Any value plays that you see right now? Like prior to these deals, I think we both felt that there was a little more value in the West, right? Although we did talk about value in the East because it seemed a little bit more wide open, right? With all the teams bunched together at the top, and that's still the case. I still think Chicago's worth a look at plus 2,800 to win the title, but they got to get healthy, and they've been struggling with injuries right now. But yesterday's trades have kind of softened my stance on them. How about the Raps, though? Raps at plus 4,500 at 45 to 1. Is that worth anything?
I mean, they're going to be a dog in 4 straight series that they got to win. It comes down to the problem with these props is if you just bet them to knock off the Bulls and then knock off the Sixers and then knock off the Bucks and then knock off the Jazz or Phoenix or Golden State, and you just multiplied your bets, you'd get like well over 100 to 1. So, I mean, And it's unlikely that they get an easy route. The only way they're getting an easy route is if they play the Sixers and Embiid is injured for the series, and then they play Golden State, and the same thing happens that happened last time they played them in the finals, where like players start getting injured right, left, and center. I mean, odds are for those big dogs, they got to kind of, you're better off just multiplying. If there's value anywhere on the board, I like the Utah Jazz. They're a good team. I don't think there's that much that differentiates them from Golden State and Phoenix, and getting 16-1 on the Utah Jazz right now is probably the best play on the board.
I saw 12-1 when I looked last night, right, to look at the updated odds on the Jazz. Might agree with that. We will revisit this at the All-Star break and see where the odds are at that particular time. If any teams have got some additional boost or, money bet on them that has affected those odds. And that's, I think, the All-Star, right? All-Star weekend is either next weekend. I think it's next weekend, actually. So we'll revisit it possibly next week. Quick thought before we get to our gambling story of the week on the Olympics, which still have another full 9 days or so to go. Have you uncovered any great value plays in upcoming events?
Yeah, women's hockey. So we'll talk about men's hockey quickly. Canada beat Germany 5-1 when they were the 2-1 favorite. They're now the second favorite at 4-1. Russia, despite 2 wins, is now only a 3-1 favorite from plus 160. Likely because they just squeaked past weak Switzerland 1-0 and even weaker Denmark 2-0. Only scoring 3 goals in 2 games against weak competition is not going to cut it. So if you look at the men's, it just looks like a very well-rounded competition. I don't see any value there. On the women's side, the Canadian women beat the U.S. 4-2 and look good. They're now minus 150 to win it all, and the U.S. is plus 130. Nobody else is close. I take a shot now with the U.S. women to win it all plus 130. Canada became the favorite solely because they beat the U.S. But if you delve into the game a little further, you see that Canada's goalie made 51 saves. And Canada scored on a shorthanded penalty shot. Get your head wrapped around a shorthanded penalty shot. That's far from a dominant win. And now instead of getting a pick 'em, you get plus 130 on the U.S. Seems like good value to me. They're the 2 top teams by far. Anybody's game. I don't think you're going to get plus 130 on them in the finals. They're going to get there against Team Canada. So now I would take a shot with the U.S. women.
And you just pissed a lot of people off in this country going against the Canadian women.
My goal is to make money.
You play no favorites.
There's no favorites. If anything, you got to just kind of fade it or ignore it. I mean, I would never go to a sports bar and start cheering for the U.S. women. I would kind of watch that game at home or cheer silently for my team.
I would highly recommend you don't go to a sports bar for the Canada-U.S. women's final, which should occur, and be openly cheering for the Americans. You are in Toronto, so I don't think that would go over very well, and your health might be in danger, sir. So, yes, stay at home and quietly root. Well, you wouldn't root for the Americans, but if you had money on them, I guess you'd have no choice, would you?
Or the game starts at 11:10 at night. I could watch a movie. I could go to bed. I could not watch the game because I'm not sure exactly where my heart and my head is at. Wake up in the morning and whatever happens, happens. Either Team Canada wins gold or my bank account's got a few more dollars in it.
So any other individual events that you found some value, or that's it?
I'm going to rest on. I'm going to rest on my 2-for-2 alpine skiing laurels for the Olympics.
All right. There will still be some events to be completed when we talk to you next Friday morning. So I'm putting it on you now, Harley. Find one or two more Olympic plays before the Beijing 2022 Olympics come to a close. To wrap it up, as we do each and every week, our gambling story of the week. Now, we discussed this very briefly the other day, Harley, and my view on the story itself has changed a little bit. And so the quick recap is, I think it was CTV News online put up a story that an Ontario man who bet $2 on a long shot hockey parlay thought he won $1,458 by predicting the outcome of 3 hockey games, only to find out he was wrong. And so what he did was he bet 3 ties, which pays big money. The problem was the Proline only pays out though a tie if the game goes to a shootout, not that it's tied at the end of regulation. It's clearly stated in the rules. OLG did nothing wrong here. The bettor was making these bets and apparently been doing it for a while and didn't realize that the game has to go to a shootout. So he thought he won because all 3 games were tied after regulation, but 2 of them were decided in overtime. And so, I guess he reached out to OLG to find out, and they're like, rules are clear. This is what they are. And so I know we were like, why is the media reporting this story? It's a complete non-story. Guy doesn't read the rules. But the more I thought about it, and I don't know the reporter's intentions, so right, I'm on the fence here because I'm not sure where the reporter was going with this. And if the reporter's intentions were, hey, betting is going to be, it's illegal now and everybody's going to be operating starting in April. If you're going to bet, understand the rules, right? If that was his intention, then it's a story that's worth reading and putting out there. If, however, his intentions were this guy got ripped off, then the reporter and the media in general, right, need to educate themselves on how to report on sports betting stories.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, I thought it was a non-story. I thought it was laughable. The Proline odds clearly explain this. OLG does a lot of things wrong. This is not one of them. They clearly explain the rules. The payouts for ties in OLG Proline are 8 and 9 to 1. And the odds of a game going into overtime are 3 to 1. It's because they include the shootout that gets this huge payout. If games went into overtime and OLG was paying out 8 to 1, Ford's government would be beyond broke in the matter of days. Like literally, it would be, I wouldn't waste my time doing this podcast or anything else. All I would be doing is betting ties. So come on, guys, you got to pay attention a little bit to the odds and what's going on. And shame on the media for picking it up. It was a meaningless story, unless, like you said, they just want to tell people, read the rules, understand the rules. And it's a good lesson for everybody. Know the specific rules of the sports book. Make sure you understand kind of what you're getting involved with. OLG has the definition of a tie in football. And a tie in football is any game decided by 3 points or less, or any game that goes into overtime regardless of the results. There's not a tie in football. They got ties in basketball. So they've created their own kind of definitions of the games to create a game that was maybe more fun or maybe more confusing back in the day, to hide the fact that if you had to do a 2-way wager, they were giving you $1.70 on each side and you could get $1.90 with Bet365 online. And why the hell would you bet with them? But if they make it 3-way lines, it becomes a little more confusing for guys to follow. So that was that story that I thought there was a non-story. Couple other quick stories. Ontario will be even busier than we expected. They've taken 30 applications already for licenses. Everybody block off April 4th. You should be ready with your credit cards, your wives, your parents' credit cards, and everybody else's. Load up on bonuses in many accounts as possible. Even the OLG right now is offering a $500 sign-up bonus for Super Bowl this week in anticipation, trying to fend off competition after a very weak retail online rollout by them. So get those credit cards ready.
And we will be, of course, talking more and more about who the operators will be once we know, once they are granted their license. And again, the magic day for everybody other than the provincial government, OLG, is April 4th. And so we'll continue to educate you and inform you leading up to that date. Before we go, next week, we will get back to another betting concept and maybe some terminology, because football will be behind us. And so we'll start to turn our attention to everything else: hockey, basketball, tennis, golf.
March Madness.
That was the next word out of my mouth: college basketball and March Madness, which is a huge, huge betting event over the course of 3 weekends. And that's not far away as well. And we'll also, as I mentioned, and we talked about the Olympics, we'll see if we can find some Olympic value for you before the games close. Again, sorry, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just want to end with a sad but true note. I'm asking all our listeners to please bet within their limits. ESPN ran a story recently about crisis workers in the gambling space. There's such an issue in Connecticut, which recently implemented sports betting, that their hotline took 13,000 problem gambling calls in the month of January, this past month.
And they just launched in Connecticut, right? Like they're new. They're new. Just recently launched.
They used to take 13,000 calls a year from problem gamblers.
Oy.
They just launched sports betting, 13,000 calls in the month of January. I want to make it clear to all the listeners, do this for fun and be responsible. It's on you, the bettor. The operators, whether they're the government or private, are designed to take your money. Enjoy the Super Bowl responsibly. If you cannot bet responsibly, do what I do for most of the games and just pass.
So along those lines, right? Last week, we talked a lot about bankroll management. And I said, bookmark that podcast. It was February. What's today? 11th, February 4th. So the February 4th podcast, we talk about bankroll management, and that's hugely important. I echo your thoughts. I got hurt many, many years ago when I was a young man, a university student, betting beyond my means. It was a hard lesson and one that I have never, ever forgotten. And so I look at it purely as entertainment, and you have to decide what you're willing to lose, not what you want to win, what you're willing to lose. So I appreciate you bringing that up again, especially on the biggest betting day of the year, which is the Super Bowl this Sunday. And, I've given you all kinds of prop bets and things to consider. Don't bet them all. Bet smart. And as exactly what Harley said, bet within your means. Finally, again, I always say at the beginning and the end of each show, send us your questions, your comments, your picks, all of it. questions@theparleh.com via email. You can reach out to us on Twitter @Jorey Middle or Harley @SharpEdgePicks. Always on social media, use the hashtag ParlehSBS. And again, we'd love to hear from you. If the questions or comments or whatever else are good, we will talk about them on the following show. And so, as we say each and every week, especially heading into Super Bowl Sunday, may all your picks be winners. Ours too. Enjoy Super Bowl Sunday. For Harley, I'm Jorey. We'll talk to you next week on the Parleh Sports Betting Show on Canada's Sports Betting Network.